Hello! Welcome to Adventures in TV Land. This video will not be like most of the other videos found on this channel. Instead, it is more of a recording of history for the sake of posterity, so that others may know what happened. Last night, the Bond County Community Unit Number 2 School Board met, and in a 4-2 vote, they voted to close Sorento Elementary School. Now, it should be noted, Sorento Elementary School is a national blue ribbon school, and the board in their decision makes them the only school district in the state of Illinois to have closed or consolidated a school during the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as being one of only a handful of schools to have ever closed or consolidated a national blue ribbon school. This decision took place in public over the course of just about 6 weeks. The first public notice was made basically in secret in a spot on the school district website that was buried on December 5th, 2021. And the board meeting in which this all took place immediately after a fourth public hearing on Wednesday, January 19th, 2022. So within a span of 6 weeks, this all took place. Initially, the meeting that was scheduled last night, on that day, on January 19th, was actually supposed to have happened on December 22nd, 2021, 3 days before Christmas. But I'm not for sure exactly why. I think partially because the board did not want to look so bad closing a school just before Christmas, and partially because all the media attention that was being gathered, and some other reasons, they postponed it. They said there was going to be, many more meetings and forums and hearings and etc., which was a lie, because there was not. And, their votes were cast. So what follows here is the video that was taken of that part of the board meeting where the vote was cast. The first part is basically the superintendent of the school pontificating for about 15 minutes or so. There's a few comments from a few board members, and then the vote. And that is what it is. So, for the sake of posterity, and for those in Sorento and those who care about the community of Sorento, Illinois, here you are. Here you have it. The board's final vote about Sorento School.
The Board of Education has received input from the community at 4 public hearings regarding the consideration of closing Sorento Elementary School. At this time, the board can discuss the topic, and if so chooses, approve one of the options listed below.
I can review those if you'd like for the board, because they are a little bit different than what the presentation is in terms of where the board has in their packet. So if you look at the agenda item that you all have in your packets, by way of these motions, option 1 is the district-wide grade level attendance centers. Option 2 is establish Sorento and Pocahontas as grade level attendance centers, assigning pupils to Sorento and Pocahontas based upon K through 3 residing at Sorento, and grades 4 through 8 would be in Pocahontas. The Greenville Elementary and Greenville Junior High would remain the same in terms of their organization. The third one, which was a new one for this meeting, in option 3, that established pre-K through second grade attendance centers at both Pocahontas and Sorento, while establishing a grade 3 through 5 attendance center at Sorento and a grade 6 through 8 attendance center at Pocahontas, while also keeping Greenville Elementary and Greenville Junior High the same. Option 4 would be to draw the hard boundary lines without open enrollment or grandfathering, and these lines will be based upon scenario C from the 2019 boundary analysis study. Scenario C expands the south and eastern borders of Sorento Elementary to the township line. That's to the east, and down Highway 140 to the south or southern border. And that would include Old Ripley in the area of attendance for Sorento Elementary. And that would be beginning the 2022-2023 school year. Option 5 would be to leave Sorento open and authorize the superintendent to continue to assign students from Sorento to Pocahontas or vice versa to address class size equity. And then option 6 would be a resolution to close Sorento Elementary upon completion of the 2021-2022 academic year, with those students currently attending Sorento to be assigned between Pocahontas Elementary and Greenville Elementary, based on new boundary lines to be established at a future date. So just to be very clear, that number 6, which is the close of Sorento, that the two things that you would not know if the board acts on that this evening is number 1, and we haven't talked about this this evening, but we've talked about it in other meetings, and this is the rationale or purpose for having this discussion in December, January timeframe, is because there are statutory requirements in terms of any riffing of certified and or non-certified staff. And although the plan we've put together looks to limit that, there is the potential for some riff of specifically certified staff, and there are statutory requirements and an extensive process, which we have legal counsel here tonight could talk about, or myself could talk about, in terms of what that looks like when your certified staff is reassigned, and there is a RIF, because it's based not just on the previous law of seniority, which is the amount of years of service, but it now includes performance evaluations, of course, licensure and certification, and to put it pretty simply, there's a lot of moving parts there. You really can't say who would be where or what the case may be. There's just too many moving parts there. In terms of the students, the discussion about open enrollment and the scenario where, for example, if all Sorento students opted to, or families opted to go, we're still talking about option 6, which is if Sorento school is to be closed. All of those students going to Pocahontas would not be an option. And so the board would have to, at some point, if they're taking action tonight on that, the administration would come back with options of boundary lines and where those students would be in connection with some combination of the current open enrollment policy that the board has now. So I just want to be very clear on that there isn't finality in terms of what this means for staff and students tonight, that there would have to be a discussion and further decision making by the board at a future date. I'll also say that option 5, I want to talk about option 5 because we've heard a little bit tonight, option 5 being leave Sorento School Building as it is. As we are today, we have already combined classrooms between Pocahontas and Sorento due to low class sizes. That would likely continue if option 5 would the board would opt for option 5. Specifically, we're talking about next year the kindergarten numbers being very low, that it would likely that those would be combined as well. Again, the idea of having one teacher for 8 or 9 students, I know is great for those 8 or 9 students, but from the district perspective and from the perspective of fiduciary responsibility, that isn't very efficient or a great use of funds. And as we've said, it's an equity issue. That experience with a class of 8 or 9 students, 10 students, whatever the case may be. And again, next year's projected numbers for kindergarten enrollment at Sorento, as we know it, based upon what data we have from pre-K and knowing the area, that would be 4 students in a kindergarten class. That would not be one that we would make a recommendation that that's a sole teacher. That would be one that would be combined, likely with Pocahontas. So those students would be starting in that type of combined classroom environment, which we already have again for 3rd and 4th grade this year. Assuming that there's not a large influx of students into those 2 grades, that it's assumed that those grades would continue to follow that path. So to a certain extent, the option 5 is already doing a form of the combination of Pocahontas and Sorento. This decision, this problem that here, despite some folks that want to make it sound like this is a created problem by my office, it is not, folks. The declining enrollment is real. And at some point in time, this district is going to have to address that. Does the district is the board in a place where they have to address that tonight? Have I ever presented a situation to this board where I said that this district is in financial peril, this is something you have to do? The answer is no to that. However, there is something to be said for being proactive and for planning for the future, and trying to look at opportunities to become more efficient, to be viable for a long period of time. And for those folks, that are here, there was a point in time when this district was close to not being that. There was a point in time when this district was doing short-term borrowing to pay the bills. Happened before I got here, and it happened my first year, that there was that type of scenario. That's not a fun place to be. And I would remind everyone that we still are a Tier 1 school. We are funding our students' education at a 66% adequacy. And according to EBF, when you talk about what is the adequacy target, what does it take to educate a child, that's what the funding formula, the state funding formula does. It says, these are the local resources you have. This is what it takes according to research, which is what we're trying to implement, what we're trying to provide all of our students, which does involve class size, which does involve social emotional support, which does involve all these things. That this is what it takes to do that. This is the number, and this is where you're at locally. And so there's 4 tiers that schools are divided through in the state. We're a Tier 1 school. That means that we are one of the lowest districts. We are one of the lowest poverty districts in the state according to being a Tier 1 school. Now, are we an upper Tier 1 school? Yes. If EBF keeps getting funded, will we become a Tier 2 school? Yes. It's unlikely we'll ever be a Tier 4 school. The whole purpose of that funding formula was to provide, because of the vast differences in funding throughout the state, some sort of equity in that. And that's a huge thing, and it's been tremendous for this district. It's saved this district financially, quite frankly. So the board is at a place where they have to make a decision on, philosophically, closing a school as the very, very last resort. No, that's not accurate. I've never portrayed that as the way it is. Maybe had I done that, maybe my numbers would be taken with more face value. So I want to address that as well. The school funding, we live in a world of estimates, and we've heard consistently from a group of folks that these are phony numbers, they're fake numbers, they're made up. Listen, I'm absolutely comfortable as a professional and as a person for this board to say, you know what, we do want somebody to look at those numbers. That's completely fine. I would welcome that. In fact, regardless of what the board does tonight around any of this, I would recommend that from the perspective of upcoming negotiations. And it has been a number of years since we've done a full 5-year financial review and a projection. That enrollment does matter in that too. The other thing, please folks, public comment has been closed. The time for folks to talk has been closed. Okay? So, my recommendation to the board is option 5 or 6. If you're making a decision at this moment, obviously it would be 5 or 6, because this whole, and I would agree with some of you, like this is not a fun place to be. It's divisive. Having the discussion is not fun. It's not pleasant, and it's not anything that anybody wants to do. I'm not going to argue about how the messaging has come across. I'm just saying that this is not a great place for our district to be in this is not a sustainable thing. So if there is indeed, so there was some public comment tonight about a 5-year review. I think there's a greater sense of urgency than a 5-year review. I don't think that's adequate. I think that the district potentially could be facing some pretty tough financial decisions if we wait 5 years to see what the enrollment does. However, could it wait a year? Could the board wait a year? Sure. Absolutely. Could they have an outside person, an outside agency? I'm sorry, I keep looking this way, and there's board members over here. I apologize. But yeah, we could find somebody to do that without a problem. And I'm telling you, I would welcome that professionally. I'd welcome some sort of validation in some of the work that's been done, which is not just by me, but by the entire administrative staff, and also by a lot of managers and department chairs in the district. So I'm happy to answer any questions about any of these. Just to cut to the chase, I'd recommend the board do option 5 or option 6. If you keep Sorento open, and if you do that, I think that you allow administrators the authority to combine classes when possible, because that's fiscally responsible to do, and it's the appropriate thing to do. I would also add to that option 5 that there is indeed an outside study, a thorough study of enrollment and finances, 5-year analysis, and let's see what a third party says. I welcome that. Sport's not being pushed. Sport can push back, board can stop. Board can stop this process, but I don't think putting the process off or a decision off another month till next week, till a special meeting, does anything for anyone. I don't think that's beneficial. I think the board needs to decide, and the board and all of us need to move on. That's my recommendation. So with that, I'll let the board discuss, but I wanted to provide that context because it is a little bit different than the numbering and the enrollment, the numbering that you have in the other packet. This is a little bit different.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to approve option 6 as listed.
I'll read that motion as it's listed. approve option 6 and approve a resolution to close Sorento Elementary School, 510 South Main Street, Sorento, Illinois, upon completion of the 2021-2022 academic year, with students currently attending Sorento to be assigned between Pocahontas Elementary and Greenville Elementary based on new boundary lines to be established at a future date. Is there a second for that motion?
I second.
This time I'll open the floor for discussion on that motion.
I made that motion. I'd like to say a few words as to why. I've always tried to explain my rationale on some of the tough decisions we make here, and I know this is a polarizing, divisive topic, but it's one, unfortunately, we have to address as a school board, as a district. When I take a look at the emotional argument, just look at the reality of the situation. We have 107 students at Sorento Learning Center. We've already combined 3rd and 4th grades at Pokie and Sorento due to the lack of students, and based on current numbers, 2nd grade needs combined as well, in my opinion. Additionally, Dr. Olson referenced pre-K numbers at Sorento as 4, which indicates kindergarten will also need combined if we stay the course. I want to point out that this is after the board voted for open enrollment in hopes of bolstering the enrollment at both Pocahontas, Sorento, and unfortunately it did not have an impact. In my mind, these numbers tell the story and the current reality of the situation. As I look at fair and equitable, I look at Sorento School, it is in need of capital improvements. There's been comments tonight that you don't have to do much to it. That's been assessed to bring it up to par with the other schools. You're looking at a $2.29 million spend as indicated in the study. That is, I believe, 2020 numbers. Again, if you look at the lack of students, combining classrooms, it's really hard, in my opinion, to make the case to spend $2.29 million on 107 students. I look at the financial. I may disagree. I think one thing collectively as a board, we make decisions, but we all have differences of opinions up here. My opinion is and has been that there's a financial cliff ahead. I believe that. Not everybody takes or sees that the way I do. As a business owner, I'm concerned. I look at the consumer price index at 7+%. I've read articles it's as high as 9.5 for 2021 in a 12-month period. Inflation is the new reality. Cost of doing business is going up. You take that in combination with ESSER funds running out. There's no matching funds here in the foreseeable future on a state and federal level. That's problematic. I want to remind the board and the general public we're running a deficit budget prior to these ESSER funds. And when they disappear, I think we've got a work cut out for us to make, and it's going to be a struggle to balance this budget. We need to make good financial decisions that are fair and equitable, and I believe we need to do more with less and be better stewards of taxpayer dollars. In closing, an individual asked the question, and I think several did. Do you want your legacy to be that you closed Sorento School? And to that individual, I'd say no. I want my legacy to be that I wasn't afraid to make tough decisions that were fair, equitable, and fiscally responsible. I believe the motion on the table is one of those decisions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Zuck. Any other board members would like to comment on that motion?
I would really like to consider option 5, to leave the building open and authorize the superintendent to continue assigning students from Sorento to Pokie, or vice versa, to assess class size equity. And this would allow us to get better financial numbers on the attendance centers, combining them together with Sorento and Pokie only, not Greenville.
Any other board members have any comments to this? You seconded the motion. Hearing no more comments from the board, Mr. Prater, roll call, please.
Mr. Zebb?
Yes.
Mr. Prater? Yes. Mr. Simmons?
Yes.
Mrs. Workman?
Yes.
Mrs. Garrow?
No.
Mrs. Fry?
No.
Motion carried 4-2.
Okay, at this time, do we have any comments from the board? Hearing none, entertain a motion that this meeting adjourns at 9 p.m.
And so, there you have it. And with that vote, the District Board of Education voted to close a school which had been in existence for over 118 years, a national blue ribbon school, and the only school in the state of Illinois to be closed or consolidated during the COVID-19 pandemic. I could say a lot more about the subject, but I won't right now. I'm putting it out here for posterity, and yeah, so there you go. Thanks for watching. Until next time.